Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Quarantine with Brennifry. Speaking of which, I was watching TV the other day and I heard someone say, actually, no, it was on YouTube. I was watching Trixie and Katya and someone called it Quarantine and I was like, Brenda's caught on! And it made me think of Brenda and how I was like, we did it first. We have like historic proof. And so that made me laugh very hard. As always, I am Tori. Crazy week. I'm on a committee for gay pride, or queer pride rather, at one of the schools I teach at, and we have been working tirelessly around the clock to get it launched on Monday. That's been eating up all my time. I've not been grading at all because I've been doing that instead. So sorry, students. That's what I've been up to. Been trying to fight the I've been calling it the Corona sadness, like Corona and crying, because I just miss outside. I miss my family. I miss my friends. Like Zoom is great, but it's not the same. I'm getting a little cabin fevery. I went outside for the first time with my husband. We went for a drive for like 4 hours to the desert. We didn't get out of our cars or anything, just drove just to get outside. And it was my first time being outside in since March. And it was really nice to just feel direct sunlight.
I'm kind of convinced we're all going to be a little agoraphobic after this.
Yeah,
Even
absolutely.
when it's safe to be outside, we're going to be like, is it though?
Absolutely. So it was nice to just feel some direct sunlight and stuff. My share of the week, I have, continuing with my series, I have Zach. Right, so we've got Zach here, we've got his little power axe. I love him lots. Yeah, Zach. Sometimes I pretend he's Adam because I love Adam too, but it just depends on what mood I'm in, if he's Adam or Zach, because I don't have two Black Rangers in the same costume to be both of them. Although I could probably find a ninja one of Adam. But yeah, so that's my share of the week. I'm going to pass it on over to Brenda.
Hi everyone, Brenda here. This week has been busy, very busy. A lot of work at home, but also a lot of work, but also a lot of Animal Crossing. So I don't know, there's just not enough time. There's not enough hours in the day. Mostly I'm quarantining with my family, and so I've been working with my dad so that he's not going stir crazy. So we're working a lot on the house, and those DIY projects take a really long time. So it's a lot of physical labor, which I forgot I'm actually pretty decent at. I think I'm a workhorse in that regard. So yay. But I'm also, as I'm working, I have my syllabus in the back of my mind and I'm thinking about that. And so one of my deadlines was to get my book list out. And so I managed to get that, but even that, I was really, was in between these two books, and given the current political climate and everything that's happening, I think I'm settled on what I want to do. So I'm happy with that. But also a lot of news watching, right? I think we're all watching the news and terrified because of the pandemic, yes, but mostly because I worry for protesters, right? I think we're all worried about seeing our Black brothers and sisters be treated by the police continuously the way that they are. And so with the protests, I think we're all here. We don't have a solution. I don't. Systemic violence is not okay. It was a powder keg and it was going to happen. But yeah, support Black causes, Black Lives Matter. And I think that's one of the things that I'm really looking into and trying to see what ways we can be allies and not take up space, but definitely amplify and show our support. So be safe out there, all of you. And you know what, we're getting through this together, I think, and that's what we have to do. On that note, actually not that note, it's not related in any way. My share of the week is very campy. It's Lego related, and it's just a these are actually, these are the two Lego pieces that I've never changed into my Lego village, because these two characters are part of my heart and soul. One of them is Supergirl, and the other one is Brainiac 5. And so they're in their little cars, right? This is when they're still not together yet, but this is one of my favorite couples in DCU. They're timey-wimey, so it's one another. Jen says that the only way I believe in love if it is some time element is involved, and she might be right. So she's really cute and adorable. She has her little cape on.
Look at her.
Like in her little I don't know, it looks like an ATV. It's a tiny little car, and then he has his little one right here. Because they're still enemies, right? They haven't gotten together, so it might not be bringing out cards. So I don't know, but that's my share of the week. Tossing it over to Jen.
Hi guys, it's me, Jennifer. So, like Brenda said, I think 2020 is turning out to be quite the year. We've suffered immense losses. We also had to endure a pandemic. We're enduring a pandemic, right? We are changing our way of living, right? And I think right now with everything that's going on, I think the move is changing our standard of living, right? And our expectations for living. So, I think we're all being hit in very multiple ways in different facets of our lives, from, our own mental health to our, immediate family life to, social, growing awareness of what the world means and being trepidatious and living in that world. So I can't say it more eloquently than Brenda just did a couple minutes ago, but yes, Black Lives Matter. Please support each other. Please be safe. 2020 is not over. And if we're being hit like this right now at the beginning of the year, I think we need to really be together and stronger together as we hit the middle and the end of the year, because we don't know what's going to come, right? Yeah. So stay safe out there. On a lighter note, I do think that Brenda does believe in timey-wimey love. And also like love that has love that is just transcended across space and time, right? My week has been slow. Again, I've been pouring a lot of love and effort into Animal Crossing. It's one of the ways I found that it's helped me de-stress, and it's my Virgo nightmare because I have to design an island both inside and out. So I'm tearing down cliffs, I'm remodeling, and I'm also putting down some cutesy stuff. So it's been really great to just sort of pour all my stress and energy into it, but it's also a time suck. But it's great to connect to friends over that. We've all visited each other our islands and stuff, and that was really nice. So Animal Crossing, please get into it. Also, I've been watching a lot of TV as usual. I just Hospital Playlist just finished. It's a wonderful, beautiful K-drama, and it's getting a season 2 in 2021. So I'm so happy.
I'm so happy for you. I'm still waiting on season 2 of Scarlet Heart.
Yeah. Well, anyways.
Sorry, that was so
shade.
I don't think that's going to happen, but I did show you other dramas and other K-drama actors you can follow, so hopefully you'll be happy there. I've also been watching, I rewatched all of Blackish, and I think that's been really helping. It's an underrated show. It's actually gotten some Golden Globe love, but it hasn't gotten the Emmy love as Black AF's creator show demonstrated. Black AF is a Netflix show that is kind of a satire parody on the creator of Blackish's life, and so he actually stars in the show himself. And so the running joke is that he's gotten all the other awards except the Emmy. But please go out there, watch Blackish. It's actually a wonderful show. It's well acted, it's well put together. The divorce episode, the potential divorce episode, breakup episode between Beau and Andre is it's fantastically filmed and acted out and scripted out. So please go watch that show. I think it does a really good job of breaking down a lot of information and history facts. So they do a wonderful black hair kind of episode and what it means to have different types of black hair. That was something that was really wonderful to watch. So I would recommend the show incredibly. And my show of the week is, sorry, I have to pull it up. So Aesthetic Nightmare. So I'm also getting a lot of artwork for my room. So this artwork I just purchased. It's from a local artist here in Pasadena. I can't find her card, but she's on Etsy, and she did this artwork that I thought was really fantastic. I'm just gonna do like a quick this, and it's Cardcaptor Sakura, and there isn't a lot of Cardcaptor Sakura fan art out there. So I was pretty stoked to find this. I actually just liked it aesthetically. I thought it was really cute. And then when I read the title and I started noticing details, I noticed, oh, hey, like this is Cardcaptor Sakura. Like you have Sakura and Lee Choran at the top of the Ferris wheel. You have like little Madison filming their interaction here. So I thought this was a wonderful piece of art that just is minimalist. It's very gorgeous, and it's just, it's beautiful.
I like the soft color palette to it too.
Yes. So
very soft and warm.
Yes. So go, like I like fan art that doesn't look like fan art sometimes. Like it just kind of blends into like a decor. So I think this does a wonderful job of just blending into decor. So support your local artists. So that's my show and tell for the week. We just finished up Asian Pacific Islander Month, and we're heading into Queer Month. So for
Queer Pride Month.
So for this month, we're going to feature a lot of queer stories. Once a week, every week, we're going to try to be as diverse as possible. We're going to try to hit shows and movies and comic books. And this week, we're starting off with Fence, Volume 1. Yay. It's a Boom comic original, and it actually follows a group of boys. Is that correct? Yeah, a group of boys going out to fencing competitions. And so, it's a very light novel. Honestly, it's very light. It's very humorous. But we wanted to feature something light coming, and just get the month started off on a light note. So I want to start off with, what were your first impressions?
Yeah, so I picked this one up kind of on a whim. I had just come off of watching Yuri on Ice when Yuri on Ice was airing, and I was like, gay sports anime is my new favorite thing that I didn't know I needed. And Fence had been out, I want to say, around the same time already, but I just had kind of like, not written it off, but I was kind of like, oh yeah, like, oh yeah, I thought that, it was before I really like started reading Boom comics, and I was like, oh, it's because a lot of times like queer comics and stuff comes across like a little like raunchy and a little like hypersexualized or kind of poorly written. And what I really liked so I figured, I'd give it a try because I liked Yuri on Ice so much. And Fence Volume 1 was like super great. I ended up really, really enjoying it.
So I actually just read this for this podcast or vlog. Sorry, it's a Sunday. I'm having a slow morning. So I enjoyed it. It was one of those things that Jen and Tori won't shut up about, and they're always talking about it. And I just kind of tune them out when they're talking because it's a lot, and I wasn't really aware of the title, so I couldn't contribute to the conversation. But then usually when that happens is they'll notice that I am tuning out, and they'll both gang up on me and tell me, oh, you need to read this. And so that's how they kind of pull me into the conversation. And eventually I got around to it. And so I enjoyed it. I really liked how light it was. I wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. And I
It's
don't
a
know
quick
why I'm
read.
surprised. I don't know why I was surprised that I enjoyed it. I mean, it makes sense. We like a lot of the same things. So it was, yeah. So it was more trepidation picking it up. One of the things that I really was struck by was, I think we talked about it a little when we did our Bend It Like Beckham discussion, but there's a scene in Bend It Like Beckham where the dad is explaining to the mom everything there is to know about soccer, right? And one of the things that fence does a lot of is kind of teach the layperson who knows
Yeah.
nothing about fencing,
Yeah.
like the techniques and how you move your wrist, right? And all of these
How
things.
to
And I
hold it. Like,
yeah, or what the proper stance is, right? And so all of these things, the way that education's kind of woven into the narrative, I also feel like it goes back to Relic Hunter too, right? Where we're talking about you get like little snippets of history. So you get these mini lessons that complement the story really well. It doesn't feel forced. It was kind of seamless. That added with all of these gay characters, well, I mean, confirmed, not confirmed, I don't even know. It's just a huge love fest. I love it. I don't know.
yeah.
It's all of these characters who are,
It's an all boys school boarding school, so you can only imagine like
they're
the
all
queer
and
love hexagons.
right, and it's these weird, and it's see, and it's not just exclusively like romantic
Right.
relationships, right? You have the homosocial relationships that are
Right.
just like these really good strong bonds of friendship, that kind of normalize male friendships in a way that I'm not used to seeing in media. So I enjoy that. While it's also very campy and it takes Jen, I think you said it best earlier today, where it's like it doesn't take itself seriously and it's just a good read. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, so I wanted to display, I didn't pull this up earlier, but I do want to share out for those who are actually viewing this vlog, not just listening. I wanted to share out, some visuals about how the comic looks like. So I just pulled up Fence Volume 1 from Boom Studios. So this is actually Fence from Boom Studios. You can just go to boom.com and check out all their diverse titles. So like Brenda said, I liked this graphic novel because it didn't take itself seriously. In a lot of ways, it reminded me of all the mangas that I read growing in high school, right? It's just very, it's very boy love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very boy love in this like school setting, and they are just like in love with each other, and there are friendships blooming all over the place.
Right.
And the storylines are both heartwarming and then also very stupid in the funny sense though, right? Like it's just very facetious. So I liked, and like Tori said, we're coming off of Yuri on Ice, which was
Right.
such a phenomenon, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember when Tori first watched Yuri on Ice and just how like he was just like blown away by
Mind
just
blown.
by the love that was portrayed between the main characters, but also the sport itself. Like Tori, if you don't know, and you probably don't, is a huge figure skating fan, and so for him to have a big anime fan, and so for him to have an anime that's also about figure skating, that's also about a boy love, I think it was just like
it was like the triple effect, like
a triple axle.
Yeah, it was a triple axle. Yes. Yeah, no, I
That was nicely
and what I think
that was nicely put, Jen.
that was very beautifully put. And because Yuri on Ice was such a phenomenon. Like there were people who don't even like anime that couldn't stop watching. Yuri even became the mascot for like Japan's like Olympic team. So,
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, he was the mascot. But yeah, I digress. But it kind of, I guess, paved the way for Fence, right? It kind of broke that glass ceiling.
Right. Like I don't think that we had we've had a couple mangas that have, centered around, sports. But even in mangas themselves, like sports as like the foreground or background for any manga story is very rare. Like you don't see that. And so, to have that take off on the Yuri stage, and now seeing this on the like American graphic novel side, I think we're getting more momentum there, right? And I think what's interesting is that, what Brenda said, like what I liked about this is that it had an educational kind of momentum too, in that it taught you about fencing,
Mm-hmm.
and it taught me things I didn't know
Yeah.
that I should care about, right?
Well,
It made me more interested in
yeah.
the sport.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about that is, I don't know about you guys, but as you were learning about the different fencing techniques, then I started to look for them in the panels themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which also had a weird effect on, like, I look at the art and I try to study it, but I don't stare at the art. Unless I'm teaching the novel, it's not something I will do, right? With fence, I kind of found myself drawn to like those moments, right? Because I was looking for the moments that I was learning about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking for the wrist, like not twisting completely, right? Or how they were handling the foil or whatever it was, whatever
Not
weapon
stepping
it was.
before lunging. Like,
Exactly. And so I found myself kind of engaging with the visual form in a way that I hadn't before. And for a very campy book, that was unexpected for me. So thank you for that recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, I want to kind of, I'm going to stop screen for a second, and I'm going to share another panel, because I think we need to talk about the characters, and
yeah.
that's best kind of shown through sorry.
Yeah, because Spets does some really great things, because you get hit with a very diverse cast. I'm sorry, with a very large cast, rather, with a sport that not everybody is like. It's not like soccer or football or baseball where people just kind of generally know, like it's just we're exposed. And they do things like this, right, that Jen just shared, right, where you can see all the characters, and then like they take Nicholas Cox, who's the main character, and he's the like character who's got a lot of raw potential, but he's not classically trained. So a lot of the instruction on what fencing is and how it works is Nicholas being instructed, which is also teaching the reader, who is like, oh, you make it go like this. Like,
Yeah, definitely. And like what I just pulled up is a screen grab of just the coach having all the main characters or supporting characters on a bulletin board, because she is putting together the matchup list.
mm-hmm.
And the team list. And so she has all their pictures displayed and all their names, and also like a small characteristics. So like the two front runners are Seiji and Harvard, and apparently they're the complete package. But
Mm-hmm.
Aiden is overconfident, and Bobby is underconfident, and Callie dependable, Eugene unpredictable, Tanner freaks out constantly, and Nicholas technique sucks.
Fast.
And so
He's so fast.
he really is.
Yeah.
So what I also enjoyed about this was that we had, and this is in line with Boom, is that it was a diverse cast. Like, it's not all one color and just one palette. It's a very diverse cast of different shapes and sizes and different races and ethnicities, right? And so
personality types too.
Right. And I think that's something that I think I remarked to you guys earlier, was that even though this this graphic novel kind of leans into the tropes, because there's a couple of tropes in there. There's a fuckboy
Oh yeah.
that's secretly in love with his best friend. I'm rooting for that couple, Harvard and Aiden forever.
Obviously.
Right? Like, even though it leans into those tropes, I think, it's not, and Tori, you can talk about this a little bit. I don't feel like it's damaging to like queer representation, just because I think it's more facetious than anything, right? It's not this graphic novel, I don't think sets up itself up to be like the end all be all of or epitome of queer representation.
Right. Like, it's not trying to be like woke, it's not trying to like make a statement. It's, for me, it's very much, it reads as literally every single high school drama straight people have been exposed to, but we get it with queer characters finally. Like, it's like,
right.
Yeah. So so typically in my classes I critique, because typically queer characters in media fall into one of three categories: toxic relationship, one of the partners dies, or hyper promiscuous. And while Aiden is falling into the hyper promiscuity, he's not the only queer character, and that's what makes it not a problem, right? It's that you get one character typically in a show, and then it's that same trope every single time, and that's what's for me, that's what's problematic. You can have characters that do that as long as they're counterweighted by characters that do not, right? Because there's personality type for sure. It's just when it becomes, when you're a minority and you're consistently painted the same way, that's the problem.
Right. So
Not
you
this,
get to highlight the diversity within the queer community while
right.
simultaneously telling this story about these boys who are trying to figure out this whole fencing team and trying to edge each other out because they all want to be like the complete package, right?
Right.
Right. And I like that. I like that kind of statement that you just shared with us, Tori. The whole like, tropes are fine as long as they're counterbalanced, right? As long as it's not just that one character existing show. And I think we see that a lot, right? We have the diversity character that's sometimes also queer, that's sometimes also like, of a different minority majority, like race or ethnicity.
Riverdale does it a lot,
The
actually.
ethnically ambiguous character in advertisement.
Yeah.
Right.
All them. Yeah.
Right. And so like you have this one character that becomes suddenly the model, or the torchbearer for like,
the token.
all people, like groups, right? And while that does mimic identity sometimes, and that we're like all multi-layered and multifaceted, it becomes problematic when that's like there's only one, and like a really popular show, or just half in a popular show. Sometimes you only just get half because they're just supporting characters. And that's what and I think this is what's really cute about this. What I find, like, this graphic novel is just so cute. Like,
so
it's just
cute. The art
so
is great too, super consistent.
Yes. So were there other hot moments that really called out to you guys? Were there moments like characters you want to talk about and dig into?
Yeah, I do want to talk about a lot of the characters, because I feel like they all kind of like similar to what we were saying, how they all have different relationships. Not all of their relationships are romantic. Not all of them are not all of them are sexual. Not all of them, like, some of them are just friendships. And like looking at this list that we have right here, right, like Nicholas and Seiji have this like really like competitive relationship. Like there's this amazing scene where Seiji gets in his head when he's fencing at one point. Aiden really gets under Seiji's skin when they're fencing each other in practice. And Seiji ends up losing. He's like undefeated, and he ends up losing because Aiden just really gets in his head. And Seiji storms off to the bathroom and is not crying, but like really beating himself up in the bathroom. And there's this like line of boys trying to go to the bathroom. And the coach she's just standing there, arms crossed, and she's like, "You can't enter. No one can go in here." And then Nicholas's bout ends, and he is like, "Where's Seiji? I need to go like rub it in his face." Because Nicholas beats Aiden, and he's like, "I need to go rub in his face that I got a direct victory against him because I beat Aiden who beat him." And so he goes to the bathroom. This one's like, "Oh, I saw him go to the bathroom." So he goes there, and Coach goes, "Oh, go right on in, Nicholas." And everyone's like, "What? Why does he get to go in?" Because Coach knows that they have this like strong rivalry relationship with each other, and that Nicholas is going to make Seiji snap out of it and want to be better. And I like that relationship, right? I like how that kind of forms a lot in their, and they're also roommates and they hate it. They like put a curtain down the center, and I think Callie even says something like, "This is different." But did you see how close
rubber duckies, and I love it. I don't know why I was so in love with that scene. It's just a big shower curtain with rubber duckies on it, and I don't know, it's just something ridiculous and so childish about it, yet they're in, because for Nicholas, the stakes are pretty high. He's a scholarship kid, right? So
yeah, if he doesn't make the team, he doesn't get to stay.
Right. So it's like, kid, you don't have time for this childish play. You gotta get your shit together, because like you gotta make the team, right?
Yeah.
And yet in the middle of all of this, there's like this petty little fight going on, right?
Yeah.
That, I mean, while that rivalry is there, I definitely think it pushes Nicholas to be better.
Yeah.
but it also pushes Seiji. The relationship that I was drawn to was Nicholas and Bobby, particularly
Love
because
that
based
relationship.
on, I mean, you get the impression that Nicholas is a hothead, right?
Yeah.
And he's not, he's there to win it. Yes, he's there to be better. And he has this whole entire backstory with like being an illegitimate child. And
Right. And he's low income and he's never seen a facility like this and he doesn't have the proper equipment.
right.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of struggles he's going through, right? And then Bobby shows up, and as you can see there, Bobby's problem is underconfidence, right? Bobby's not necessarily the first person to speak out or to even perform when fencing is not going to be the first one to take the step, right? Or it might be because you know, confidence issues.
Yeah.
But when Bobby and Nicholas first meet, Nicholas almost immediately takes on the big brother role,
Mhm.
right? And he's just kind of helping Bobby, and they're just talking, and he's just there to listen, no judgment, just kind of
Mhm.
just let's. And I really enjoy that. Bobby has a lot of things going on, and I just enjoy the relationship that they set up there.
Yeah, and I want to touch upon two things that you both brought up, and so I kind of want to dig a little deeper into Bobby's character, but I also want to talk a little bit about Nick's character, and that you both mentioned that like he's low income, like he's coming from like an underprivileged background. I think that this kind of I like how this comic kind of highlights that journey for low income students
Mhm.
who get into sports as a way to get out, right? Get out of their circumstances and get out of like the standard of living that they're used to, right? And I think um and that I think it's not something I think it's something that we know about, but
Mhm.
it's not something that's often talked about. Like we have certain movies like that kind of talk about that subject, and it's always about football, right? What is it? What was that movie called? The Big
Blindside? Was it
Blind Side. The
Blindside?
Blind
Yeah, with
Side with
Sandra
like Sandra
Bullock.
Bullock. Yes.
Yeah.
So we have big block. We have big movies like that, but they're always about football, right?
Yeah.
And it's always the same. It's always like that same kind of character and or same kind of person that they know will sell to audiences. So what I really enjoyed here is that like we're getting the same story, but we're getting it with an unknown sport like fencing.
Mhm.
And you know I think that was an important kind of differentiation that the book made for itself, right? And I like that highlight that like like Nick is coming from this very like low income background, and like and this sport is a way to elevate his
And he's
position.
at a school that has turned out a gold medalist Olympian
Mhm.
previously. And so it's like he's got a lot writing on this. Like this school has produced an Olympian.
Right, and he comes into it as like feeling like an outsider. I mean, he is kind of overconfident sometimes, but he does kind of feel like an outsider, like an imposter, especially when he goes up against the team, right? And they're so technically versatile.
Well,
And
I think that overconfidence is something we can touch on though, because I don't necessarily think it's overconfidence. Maybe I read it differently than you guys did, but for me, it's more of a defense mechanism,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because he does feel inferior to all of these characters, particularly the ones who have been training for so many years. When actually the coach is talking to Nicholas about his technique, he says, like, you know what? She says, well, yeah, these guys have this technique because they've been training for years. You gotta start from the basics, right? You have to learn your way up. And so here's the thing about Nicholas: the entire time he's been struggling to get someone to train him, right? In
Mm-hmm.
order for him to get his first coach, he had to kind of prove himself. So he ended up cleaning the entire gym, and that gym looked like it was falling apart. And he
Yeah.
left it like clean, pristine, and so that was enough to get him some lessons, but these were not classical lessons, right? In the traditional sense, it was more like, here's how you hold the foil, and this is kind of how you do it, right? But it wasn't formalized training like the rest of the fencers have, right? So even as a scholarship kid, he's already starting from a different level of access, right? but even to get to that point of access, he's had to work so much harder, right? And I think that's one of the things that I do like about this novel, is that it kind of traces that, and it tries to highlight that while all these competitive relationships are happening, you also see the struggle that each individual character is having to kind of overcome, right? Whether it be an economic, well, not and multiple economic barriers, right? For others, it's emotional levels, right? Like with Bobby, or with Seiji, it's like this legacy that he's trying to build, right? And in a lot of ways, I feel like Seiji becomes his own worst enemy in a lot of instances, which is also like very self-sabotaging and traumatic in its own way, but it's a different form of struggle, right? It's not any more or any less, it's just different from someone like Bobby's struggle, right? And then you have Nicholas's struggle that is both emotional and economic, and so much harder to kind of overcome when he has all these issues with illegitimacy, but also with the imposter syndrome, right? And it's, I don't know, for being a light comic, it's an interesting ad to have so many multi-layered characters, if that makes sense.
Definitely. And, with Aiden, I think I like the word you use. He feels inferior. He feels, he definitely feels like an imposter. And it's something that I think, I think that it's something that people can connect to, right? Queer or not. It's just, there's moments sometimes where you feel like an outsider, you feel like you're an imposter, you feel like you're inferior, you don't have the requisite skills to kind of keep up, right? There's also Aiden also doesn't, Nicholas doesn't also have like the language to kind of talk about fencing the same way that everyone else does. Even though he is involved in the sport, he just doesn't have like the language or the culture to really articulate himself well with the others, right? But, I know I felt like an outsider. I felt like, isolated, and I felt like inferior oftentimes. And I think that's something nice, that I think that's something that the novel captures very nicely with Nicholas's character. And then even with Bobby, like, and going back to Bobby and just like the different highlights of identity that's being shown, like, Bobby is underconfident, but they're also like the most petite, I think, of the team. So they're also combating against all these other more fence physique types. And I think that's also something interesting that the novel brings together, is that like the different body types and, and how that affects fencing, because Bobby has to overcome that hurdle.
Yeah, and having the shorter reach, being shorter than the other fencers, right? They talk about that a lot because Bobby and Nick are on the shorter side. Yeah, it's really great. I really enjoy Bobby's character a lot. I don't know exactly what they're doing with them yet because they haven't said, but they're possibly non-binary, they're possibly trans, they're possibly gender fluid. We don't know. They haven't made a statement. But I'm loving it either way, whatever way they go with representation there. I'm here for it.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. Like, I think that's why I kind of made the move to kind of use third person pronouns with Bobby, because
right.
Bobby, we don't know yet, right?
Bobby's never stated pronouns or anything yet. All we know is they're in the boys' dorm.
Right. And so like I'm just saying them, or right, just to cover all bases. But let's talk a little bit about their choices to kind of dress gender fluidly, and like what is that
present them.
Present for them. Like, what do you think about that? Like when you saw that, Tori, like what did you?
So when I first saw Bobby's character, I thought it was a co-ed school. I thought I had just missed something and it was a co-ed school. And then they're like, oh, it's boys only, and this is the boys' dorm, and I was like, oh, they're like really like, because oftentimes in the community we talk about this a lot, especially during Pride Month, is that in the LGBTQIA plus community we tend to only focus on L, G, and B, and I don't know what they're doing with Bobby, but I'm so happy to see like something else that is not LG or B. Like, I don't know what that is yet. Maybe they are in the LG and B. I don't know. But they're seemingly so far in the first two volumes, not your traditional gay, cisgendered male, right? At least the way they're presenting. And I'm so here for it. And I love that, like, they're put into this world that is an all boys school and no one questions Bobby. Like, Bobby even has a, like, what I'm imagining, a custom made uniform, because they wear school uniforms that is female presenting. It's a skirt. And so that, like, implies that even the school is on board with this, which is amazing. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's a detail I didn't even catch. That's
Yeah, because there wouldn't be a female uniform at an all boys academy. But Bobby clearly has one, so.
I think there's something to be said for the decision not to disclose, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's part of Bobby's prerogative. That's their choice, right? And
Yeah.
so I think,
It's their identity.
right, and not explicitly telling us or pointing to Bobby's pronouns. I think the novel is working to normalize the idea of gender fluidity,
Absolutely.
emphasizing that it is not our right to automatically assume or to assign, right? Like, that is an individual choice, and even disclosure is a choice. And I think that's a profound statement to make, and something that needs to be discussed further, right? I don't think it's necessarily I mean, it's becoming more of a topic of conversation in our media. But when was Fence published? I'm sorry, I didn't look up the publication date. That was
It
my
came out
bad.
a few years ago. I don't have the exact date, but I want to say I read it like 4 years ago? 3 years ago, maybe?
I don't know. But I do think that is, regardless of it, because it seems to be a stronger movement now, right? In recent years. So making that point, making it like a goal not to disclose Bobby's chosen pronouns, or it totally, it works, right? 2018, according to Jen.
Okay.
So that was 2 years. 2 years ago, right? So this is where we're starting. Part of visibility is us learning how to interact with these communities, right? With different communities, not these communities. I misspoke. Sorry. With different communities, right? But understanding what our role is to help them, and to how to politely and respectfully and establish that discourse, right? And for us to do that, we have to understand that it is not our right to be like, so to ask inappropriate questions, right? And I think with Bobby just not disclosing, that's exactly what we're getting, right? Yeah. It's when Bobby's ready, we're gonna know. But
Yep.
In the meantime,
and it wasn't volume 1 or 2, so Bobby will let us know.
And it might not ever happen. I think that's also, I think something that I mentioned earlier was that it kind of follows the tropes of like Japanese manga. Mm-hmm. And so in some Japanese manga, like you have a cross-dressing, you know, fluid character sometimes happening, and they never disclose. Like they never say they're this or like
not acknowledged. It just is, and that's okay.
Right. And so like that's something that I think I remember reading in like Gentleman's Alliance. You know, that's one title that stands out to me. But it does happen, and I think you're right. And so I think it's something that also makes this I was going to call it a manga, this graphic novel successful, is that it also kind of has some like manga tropes happening. So like you have like some of the images in the graphic novel like just scream out manga to me.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
I have one here. I'll try and share it with everyone, because it is just one of those moments where it's very reminiscent of manga, right? Especially when a character is angry or frustrated. We get a moment where like the eyes and the face just completely change. Oh, it's not gonna let me do it. I'm sorry.
I can display one that I have, I think. Okay. So I'll display one that I have, because I think this moment for me was also very manga.
Yeah, that's exactly the moment I was trying to share. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, that one. Perfect.
Yes. Thank you, Jen. Teamwork. Okay, so the fists right, are not fully, or they're
Yeah.
clearly big balls, like they're balled into fists, right? Which actually at the moment really reminds me of the Animal Crossing character, right? Because like when he laughs, he does this, right? But the face too, right? There's no pupils; it's just a blank white, and
Got
then
the fangs.
the teeth look like fangs, and there's steam coming out of his ears, and there's just like a sense of, this is not anger, this is not usual anger or frustration, this is rage, right?
Yeah.
And it's comical, it's funny, and that's one of the things that really, it's a manga trope, right? Or genre convention.
Yeah.
That you see, and you see this sprayed throughout the entire novel. So you definitely see manga and Japanese anime's influence on fence, not just in terms of normalizing gender fluidity, but also in terms of the art style.
There's a scene in volume 2. I don't have it, unfortunately, but Nick is fencing against Aiden, who is like the pretty boy, and he kind of gets in your head when you're fencing. He'll whisper things to kind of throw you off your game, and he's trying to play these mind games on Nick, and none of them are working. And it's like two identical images, and like on one side it's like what Aiden is actually saying. He's like, oh, you're just here on your scholarship, that's really nerve-wracking, you really can't mess this up. It's like, and what Nicholas hears, I beat Seiji, so beating me is like beating Seiji, is like all Nicholas is hearing. Like, and those two together just like made me laugh so hard, because again, it's so manga, and like just
I think a similar, like, I know that you don't have it, but a similar scene is
yeah,
probably
yes,
The
like
flower
the
boy
Bobby
scene.
did.
The flower boy scene. OMFG. I love this scene. Yes.
There's a lot of this, and I love it. It's like what Bobby sees, what Nicholas sees. Like,
yeah, I
no.
feel like what I'm displaying right now is a Bobby vision versus Nicholas vision of Seiji, and so like
Yeah.
Bobby's vision is all pink and like roses on the corners of the panel, and like
Seiji is perfect to Bobby.
There's even that little strand of hair. There's a little strand of hair, 'cause, like the wind probably kind of shuffled his hair a little bit. Right?
and like Nicholas's vision is dark and dreary.
And look at the eyes. There's clear anger in the eyes, right? Well, that's mean anger. That's murder eyes. Those are murder eyes.
Yes, and like I just want to show one more thing. This is right next to each other, but like this is like the dramatic like Shakira hips don't lie walkout moment with the main fencing team with Harvard and who's leading the charge, and then like Bobby is in the corner just being like squeeze.
Right?
He is a total fan, or she, or they are a total fan. I'm sorry. But like the little hard mouth and the little like, ee, right? That's me fangirling. That's me fangirling, you guys.
Yeah, it's great. Because so for those who aren't familiar with fencing, because I am not either, but what I've learned is, everybody is on the like fencing team, but only 3 people get to fence in the tournaments. Like there's the main team, which is like the 3, and then like everybody else is like the reserves, the alternates, if you will. So
Right, and I think that's something that like I think Brenda brought up earlier. It's just like you learn so much about fencing in first volume. It's incredible. One of the things that I liked was just how it highlights the athleticism that goes into fencing as well. So like there is a scene in various scenes in the graphic novel that show this like the intense drills and exercises they all engage in order to be the athletes that they are. And so, I think there's a lot of out there. I think there was like an episode of Modern Family in its first season where like Manny is going to a fencing tournament, and Jay is like, what the fuck is that, right? Like he thinks that's like a really girly sport, like it's mini golfing essentially. Like, is it really a sport, right? And so he goes to the fencing
I'd argue that even regular golf is not real sports, but controversial opinion though.
That is going to be a very controversial opinion. So, Jay goes to the fencing tournament for Manny, and then, he's just like blown away. He's like, oh my God, they're really going at it. Like Manny's a pro, like, and like, I can't believe like I'm seeing this type of athleticism coming out of Manny. And like, you know, Jay gets really excited over the fact that like Manny is like super athletic in this one sport.
Yeah.
But I think fencing is, you know, it's still related and still thought of as like a very elite sport in terms of like associated with like the aristocratic
Yes.
circles, right? It's very like
very French,
very European,
yes.
very, you know, it's very it's delicate. I think it's seen as delicate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this graphic novel does a really good job of upending some of that myth and just saying like, no, like these athletes train a lot. Like it's a lot of focus, discipline, just, you know, exercise, and it's, you know, it's a lot of drilling.
Yeah,
and I think
yeah, there's two things that really stood out to me in this same vein. There's the scene where after the first day of like preliminary matches, the boys are undressing in the locker room and Tanner takes off his like fencing top and you see 15 bruise marks on his body. And they were like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, Sadie just hits really hard. And like, but like you see, like, those are from being fenced. Like, and I was like, wow, like they're really hitting each other hard. Like, it's not just like this little flimsy poking stick. Like,
right. Like you see, it's Tanner and it's also like Nick. Sometimes you see like scratches on his like body, right? You know, and the glorious body shots that happen, right? Like you see like scratches, like they get hurt, and I was surprised. Like
and the other thing I really, really like is as they're I think it's like a 2-day thing where they're eliminating, they're deciding who's going to be on the main 3 boys that are going to go to tournaments, and the coach says that this is half physical ability and half mental like fortification, because those who crack under the pressure sink, and then you see like all like and it was like by the like second day or whatever, you can it's like they're already starting to decide like who's going to be a front runner and who is not. Those who have 2 losses can still technically come back, but if they don't shake it off, they can't, and things like that. It was just like that's something we think about with athletes though, is like, oh, like they're working so hard. There's like this whole mental side of being an athlete, right? And I like that they really promoted that in fence, to take it out of that kind of dainty European, air quotes there, like sports, right?
And I think, you know, you highlight a really important point is just, I think sometimes we view sports as just a brawn, like, you know, brawn over brain thing, right? Like that mental acuity is not associated with sports and athleticism. And so I think that this, you know, this novel does a really good job of like, you know, kind of upending some of that assumption, and that it is a lot of strategies involved, right? There are certain techniques that you have to learn in order to be better. So like I think one of the struggles that, you know, Nick has is like, while he's really fast, as Brenda mentioned earlier, his technique is poor, and so he's just going to like, he's gotten lucky so far. What it is, he's got
there's that
really
scene where I think Callie is like, oh, you have to watch this, and I think it's Tanner's like, why am I watching this dumb freshman? It's like, he sucks, his technique is terrible. And then like Nick gets this like amazing quick hit in, and then Callie goes, because that happens sometimes. And like, and then it's just like mind-blowing for all of that. It was like he took advantage of someone's overstep in like a fraction of a second and was able to get the point because he's so fast. And then Callie's like, this is why we watch him, because sometimes that happens, and that's amazing. And if he can hone that skill, he's going to be unbeatable.
And while like sports, you know, does involve luck and does involve immense strength, like it's also strategy. So like if you have all 3 working at the same time, you're going to be an amazing like athlete, right? And I think that's something that like you see in the stories, that all the boys, all of them are trying just to be their best. And despite their shortcomings, because they all have shortcomings, like, you know, I think my favorite fuckboy,
right, he's like the savant that refuses to practice, like,
right? So like he's super naturally good, but he just doesn't practice because he's like a fuckboy.
I don't need to.
Right. And so, you know, the moment that he does get beaten, that's like a you know, a wake up moment for him. I mean, not enough to like actually change, but like
it shakes him though.
It does shake him, but you know, it goes to say like it's not just all natural ability that can get you, can advance you in the sport, right? Like, and you know this, Tori, like you were like a Hall of Fame like martial artist, right? Like, you didn't get there by chance.
yeah, it's a lot of work.
Can you like tell us a little bit about like just how much time you spent like refining? Like,
so
what was a normal work like day or workout week for you? Like,
right,
how many?
So ages like 4 to 12. I got my first black belt at 9. But so ages 4 to 12 was approximately 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, was like kind of the general thing. As I got older, those 2 hours started turning into 5s, 6s, right? As you started to go up and up and up, which turned into private lessons, which turned into just teaching the classes yourself, which is another part of it. That's a whole nother layer, like, because if you can't teach, you don't know, things like that. So that becomes, and then eventually being kind of scouted out for a circuit to work under somebody where the training was like every day, like 4 or 5 hours a day, go home, ice, eat some food, do some homework, start over the next day. And it was that, and then you'd go and compete, and everything would be broken and hurting, and you'd take a couple weeks off to get your toes fixed, and then you'd start all over.
I am definitely of the leisurely kind. That's intense.
I competed, the last big tournament I competed in, I haven't competed in years, I competed on 3 broken toes, and I could barely walk on my foot, and I won 5 gold medals. 6 gold medals, 6 gold, and then in, so the way it works is there's the individual like sections, right? So there's like kata, there's weapons, there's sparring, etc., all of it. And then there's grand champion after. So all the winners from all the different classes, so because a lot of times they break you off into weight class, or they'll separate the types of weapons out, 2-handed versus single-handed, right? Doubles versus singles. They'll all come together for the grand championship for the all-around best in weapons and stuff, or the all-around best in fighting, all-around best in kata, because they also tend to break us off via style. So different styles of martial arts have different focuses. So they tend to put the flashier ones together, and they tend to put the like more traditional, slower moving ones together. So like I do Tang Sudo, which is a Korean art. So I would oftentimes go against Japanese Okinawan style martial artists, because it was a slower martial art that was more about form than it was about flash, where they'll stick like Taekwondo and like a lot of the Chinese martial arts together for the flash and the flare, because it's like apples and oranges. It's different focuses on what should be allowed, but then you all come together for grand champion. So yeah, I took second. I usually take second in grand champion because I crack under the pressure, but
that's like way more accomplished in athletics than I am.
Yeah, I usually make it to like the second, like to the last round of grand champion, and then I crack, and it's usually by like fractions of a point. So
I think I got a participant trophy in an academic decathlon once.
good job,
I was like, thank you for being here. You sucked, but thank you.
I never do the sparring.
It was our first year.
That's how you break ribs.
I'm sorry?
I never do the sparring grand champion, because that's how you break ribs, because I'm at the bottom of the flyweight, which is the featherweights, if it's in boxing terms.
I was going to ask, yeah, I mean, how, like,
yeah, and for grand champion fighting, they put all the weight classes together. So I don't want to get hit by a 250-pound guy. Like, I really don't. Like, like that's how you get ribs broken when you're 103. So I mean, I'm not anymore, but I used to be. Like,
whatever, Tori.
Because the flyweight is
not a conversation we're gonna have. No. Absolutely
Flyweight
not.
is 120 and below. So
But like, thank you for sharing
yeah.
like that rigorous kind of training circuit that you participated in. I'm curious, like, do you have a different sort of mindset though when you're in like training mode? Like,
Oh yeah, my family talks about it a lot actually. My godfather, my Brino, went to one of my things, and I'm usually a really happy-go-lucky, bubbly person, and he was like, "I was scared of you." He was like, "You were like scowling, and you had like no emotion in your eyes," and I was like, "Oh yeah," because I was in like business mode, and like, and he's like, "And then you spun the nunchuck on your wrist." I was like, "Oh yeah, it hurts really bad, but you get used to it." And he was like, "What?" So like. I'm like, you get used to the pinching because it's a chain. And like,
I think
he's
the
like, and your
only
foot
thing
was
ever
broken?
that
And because there's one point where like you stomp and you like do like a thing, right? And he's like, you stomped on your broken foot. How? I was like, oh, I used my heel because the front of it hurt. And so like, and he was like, but then you jumped in the air and kicked a few times and then landed on that same broken foot. I was like, yeah, because I was kicking with my right foot. Like, and he was like, I just didn't understand like how you were able to keep it together.
I think the only thing I've ever dedicated that much time to
wow.
is Pokemon games. And my thesis, I guess my thesis, but wow,
Yeah.
that's intense.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. Yeah, there's definitely a personality shift that happens when you're, and there it's a total code switch because there's just different expectations of you as a martial artist in front of like the judges, in front of other martial artists. There's this whole like you have to be like super super respectful or like you will like get a red card if you will, right? Like in Karate Kid, all that shit that happens, like he would have been like kicked out of there so fast for all that BS, like things like that, right? Like you have to be so so respectful, and they will absolutely like drop you in points if you're not. Like I remember, there was Grand Champions. I wasn't in it because it wasn't my age bracket because they do separate you by age, but they don't separate you by gender, and it was a man versus a woman, and he was refusing to fight her. He's like, I'm not going to fight her. She's a woman. And she's like, that is so disrespectful. Like, you will respect me as a warrior and as a martial artist. And he like was refusing to like fight her. And like the judges were really upset, like that he was like, I'm not going to fight a girl. I'm not going to fight a girl. And my coach, Grandmaster Smith was like, oh, he's not afraid of like fight. He doesn't think he'll win, and he doesn't want to have that look of losing to air quote losing to a girl, or if he beats her being too aggressive with a girl, which is not a thing in martial arts. Like you're supposed to respect each other as martial artists, not gender. Like it's woven into the way like we interact. Like you respect a black belt all the same regardless of their gender. There's no like, oh, ladies first when it's time to get water or to grab your sweat towel or something, right? It's like, no, it's like all the black belts are the same. Like it's they don't like gender us ever. Like men and women compete in the same for kata, the same for weapons. Like there's no separation.
Wow. I I think we talked a little bit about like
Yeah.
just like the lack of gender in martial arts, but
Yeah.
hearing it, I'm always awestruck whenever I hear you talk about this other life of yours because we met Tori like
After that
after,
ship sailed.
and what like Tori's like grandfather or godfather said was true.
Yeah.
Like you're just a very bubbly person. Like you just like right, and like what you see here with Tori is what you normally see in real life as well,
Yeah.
right? Very bubbly, very like supportive, and just like squishable, right? Even though like
Yeah.
hug very often, but he's very squishable. But hearing him talk about like his martial arts life and his athletic persona, like I think is always like kind of like um shattering in a way because like it is a different life and different persona,
Yeah.
and
It
I
doesn't
think,
match what people think when they think of me.
right, and I think combined with like what we're reading with Fence, like I think that's also what we're seeing in Fence a
Yeah.
little bit too, right? Like a lot of time is like we what we think of fencing is not necessarily what's actually happening in the sport, right? And that different mind frame I think is consistent among different sports is like you just become a different person because there are different expectations of you. And we talk a lot about this as we teach too, because we talk a
Yes.
lot about like, rhetorical situation and like
Yes.
audience awareness, right? Like every
switching.
right. How do you guys feel about how this novel dealt with like sport and then queer representation and like how they like push the two realms together?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Go ahead, Brenda.
no, you can go. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was trying to put thoughts together in my head, and then I opened my mouth for some reason, and then like we started hufflepuffing, and then
It's like the potatoes are mashing together.
yeah,
It's just
like my mouth moved before my brain did, and I was like, wait, words, how do they work? Um, but I really like this idea of blending, especially because specifically, very, very specifically, gay men are never seen as athletic threats in athletics. Like, they're never seen as competition. They're never considered to be athletes, or that they can't even be athletes, right? Women is fine. They'll be like, oh yeah, they're a lesbian. Of course they're good at sports, whatever, insert inappropriate words, right? But for men, there's this like degrading shock to it. Like, oh, you can't play football, you're gay. Oh, you can't play baseball, you're gay. You can't be a martial artist, you're gay. Like, it's always been something that's been an underlying thing, especially in my own martial arts career. I've had people like not take me seriously because of my sexual orientation and not look at my skill, right? And I like that this graphic novel is showing that queer people are and can excel in athletics.
Yeah, I think one of the things that sorry, there's a motorcycle. It's really loud outside.
We can't hear it.
Oh, okay. Sorry. It was louder than my thoughts for a second there. I think one of the things that we're seeing moves toward, right? One of the things that happened after it was the Pulse Night shooting, right?
Yeah.
And that was a devastating and awful mass shooting that happened. A lot of people in the sports community tried to rally around the queer community. And I remember one of the things that happened was the captain for the U.S. soccer team captains have to wear the armband, right? And so what he did was wear a rainbow armband that time. And so and he donated it so that it could be auctioned off, and all the proceeds would go to relief for the families, right? To help with funeral costs and whatever. Oh, not whatever, with all of the costs that have happened as a result, right? And so, and there's this continued struggle with visibility in terms of the queer community when it comes to sports, right? Because unfortunately, a lot of the times, particularly for men, right? You're right, for women, it seems like it's more accepting in certain sports, not all of them, right? In certain sports, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, it's not a big deal. We don't care, right? It's just who you are. It doesn't matter. You're still an athlete to us, and you're our teammate. But when it comes to male sports, it doesn't. I mean, there's the rampant homophobia that you see in soccer, in basketball, in all these different sports, right? That this novel, in its own small way, tries to counteract that, right? And it's effective in terms of, like the sexuality becomes not necessarily, it's important, it's there, but it's not the focus, right? The focus is the characters, the people, right? Centering the individual characters and who they are and how they interact with each other, so that we remember their humanity first. And I think I like that, right? So when you're trying to tell stories about the sport, and we can't forget that the sport is important, yes, but ultimately it's that individual character and how those characters treat each other, and ultimately how the reader responds to these characters, right? Because hopefully what we're getting through with all this fiction is a stronger vision of how we should be acting in real life, right? It's a model for how we should be interacting with each other, how we should be treating each other. Obviously not like Nicholas and Seiji, like not the competitive thing, but the like respect for one another. And I think this novel does a good job of highlighting the diversity of these characters and in teaching the reader not just about fencing, but also how we should interact with people who we may not understand initially, but that we should at least make the effort to try to understand so that we can interact in a way that is respectful for each other, but also a way that is productive, so that we can foster a discourse that moves us towards something better than what we've had before.
I think that was well said. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You have really great statements, Brenda. It's hard to follow up.
It is hard to follow. That's why I try to sneak in first. That's why my mouth just opened. I was like, I need to go first because I can't follow this up.
Well, like, yeah, it's usually like me going afterwards, and I'm like, well,
Like,
okay.
I like the colors because that's how I am. The pictures were pretty.
You guys are awful. You guys are wonderful. You know that you are brighter than the sun. You guys are so fucking awesome. Shut up.
We're distant stars in the solar
Thank
system.
you.
You're the sun.
No, it's not true. That is absolutely not true. I'm a tiny little meteor. You guys are suns.
We're all suns, about to collapse on one another. Because I think that's how
Ending until we implode.
I think these are called black holes. I actually don't know anything about science, so I don't know.
either. No, I liked how, like, what you both said, right? I think the story does a really good job at normalizing and undercutting, right, certain assumptions about queerness and sportsmanship, right? In a lot of ways, like I'm going to connect with like what Tori said earlier. Tori said like a lot of people have, what you see on the outside is not what like.
Mm-hmm.
And when I tell them about my like martial artists, like it doesn't fit what they see on the daily with me, right? And so I think that happens a lot with sports as well. Like we have an assumption about sports. It's like, very, Greek pantheon, Olympian kind of endeavors, right? Very manly, just kind of, even though like there's a lot of homosexuality going on there too, right? Like Troy. But, we sports are often associated with just like the manly physique and just like the manliness and the strength brutality of like the sport itself, that like, queerness is not often talked about in sports. And like it's, because we have so many tropes on like just the media with like the hyper feminized big gay trope, right? Or the gay man trope, it's very hard for folks to see, gay men competing in athletics, right?
And then losing to a gay man, air quote, right? Like
right, because we don't see that in like the media. Like I'm trying to think about the shows that I watch, and like if there is a gay man there, it's often he's often like dramatic and hyper feminized and like really funny, can give the sass back. But there's not a lot of representation of like just like the straight laced kind of sports gay man, right? And if it is, it's a supporting character, and it's to kind of counterbalance the other hyper feminized dramatic comedic gay character, right?
And they're usually dating each other. And there has to be some type of binary there.
Right, and they're usually dating, right? You're right. So, I think that this novel does a good job of just like normalizing all the personality, like using like the typical personality types of a high school drama, and then making them all queer or not queer or whatever, and just making it not a big deal, just normalizing the whole thing, right? So like it just feels like a high school story.
Yeah.
Right, that we're reading, that akin to like what I read when I was growing up, which was like Oran Host Club, or
that was like the closest thing you could get.
Yes. And or to any other like Saved by the Bell, or like any other high school. What are other high school TV shows that I can't remember?
California Dreaming.
Power Rangers was my high
90210,
school
I
show
imagine.
because they
I've
were
never
in high
watched
school.
it, but I'm
Yeah,
guessing.
Power Rangers. Sabrina is a high school.
Sabrina! How did we forget
I was just
Sabrina?
watching Sabrina. What is wrong with me?
What is
Sister,
wrong?
sister, right? Things like
Yeah.
that.
Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, you just reminded me of something I need to show you guys. There's something circulating about Fresh Prince earlier. It's good, but yeah. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, it's just that typical high school story. So like if you're really into like these type of stories and kind of just want to just, have something of a light read that's really funny, that's normalizing, that does touch upon these things, that like teaches you about a sport that you didn't know anything about, right? I would definitely check this out because I think while light, it does a really good job of doing
Yeah.
a lot of normalization.
Yeah.
And it's a really quick read.
Absolutely.
Total page turner. Like you can read, like I reread volumes 1 and 2 for this in like one day because I forgot how good it was and I just kept going. So.
Yeah, there's definitely like an addicting kind of quality to it that reminds me of mangas, right? Like with mangas, I would just like pour page.
Oh, I can get through like 30 some chapters in like a night.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well, and there's always someone to root for, right?
Yeah.
If you don't necessarily connect with Seiji, you'll be connecting with Nicholas or Bobby or Aiden. Yes, definitely favorite fuckboy in that novel. Or Harvard, right? There's definitely something for every type of reader, so you'll end up rooting for at least one or two characters.
Yeah.
You'll end up rooting for all of them. Because
you either root for all of them or you root, like, I think that was something that I loved about Oran, was that like I loved every character, right? From like Honey Senpai to like Tamaki to all of them. I can't remember their names now, but
it's been so long.
It's been so long.
I remembered Honey's name too, though. I think that's telling that we both remember the little like Shotokan boy.
Right. I'll call both of you out and tell you that you remember Tamaki and Honey, and they're both the little blonde kids. So it's a problem, you guys. It's not okay.
I was like, Hikaru, that's one, and then
I remember the twins. I don't remember their names. I remember there's twins.
Hikaru was one.
Mori.
Yeah, I was trying to remember Mori, but I couldn't remember his name.
Mori's my favorite, so that's why I remember him. Yeah, I don't remember the second one though.
Hikaru.
The guy that was really good, like he managed the host club.
Oh yeah, and his family like owned the Secret Service or something. Like it was.
Yeah. He's like the third son, so he has no any fortune that he gets, he has to make it himself.
Yeah.
Yes, I loved him too. Why can't I remember any of their names?
I don't know, because only the world revolved around Mori for me, and I only cared about Mori.
Kiss, kiss, fall in love.
Kyoya, there you go.
Kyoya, and then Kaoru is the other twin's name. Yeah. Well, anyways, like that little, there's characters you root for, like there's certain character types you root for, right? I think that like Fence has the same thing, but there's also certain like relationships we're rooting for in this. So like if you're like me, like I like Sojo, so like I like a good pairing, and I will stick with a show or read because of a good pairing, which is why I push Brenda to watch more K-dramas.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
I'm so mad they're not dating on the CW show yet.
I know. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Okay, that's not even a conversation we can have right now. You have 5 hours. I mean, I guess quarantine we kind of do, but
right.
Anyway.
But Friends have the same thing, right? Like I am in love with Harvard and Aiden, and I want that relationship to like happen.
Me too. I'm rooting for them.
And then of course there's the main couple. Like you can probably make a case for like Seiji and Nicholas as well, right? Like or not. Like I think it's a playful story, and
I think it can be the kind of relationship that's combustive and important, right? Like it'll be the kind of but I don't feel like they would be end goals, right? But they'll be like the kind of relationship that it's just it's fire when they're together and it's great and they're wonderful, and then but it also really quickly falls apart, and then they're better as friends, I think. But I also kind of want to see it. I don't know. I'm
I
conflicted.
could really see them like being like, oh yeah, no, this feels right. And then the competition side comes out and gets in the way of the relationship. Like,
Yeah.
'cause they both want that spot more. Um,
Yeah, I can see that too.
there can only be one gold medalist.
And that would, and I think if that happens, like that would even add a more interesting layer to
Yeah.
the whole, discussion of sportsmanship, queerness, and then competition on top of that, right? Like, how do relationships look like for those athletes, right? So it's a really fun, playful read, honestly.
Third volume's out now as well, so you can definitely, I'm sure there'll be a bundle at some point for all three.
I would definitely try to get it on sale. Like Tori and I were talking about this earlier. It is a bit pricey for like the amount of like issues that you get per volume. Like
it averages around 4 issues of volume for the same price as something that would typically have 5 to 6. Still totally worth the read, but I would grab it on sale.
Especially if you're not sure about it. Like grab I've seen the first volume like for $1.99 or like $3.99 on sale, and so I would or rent it from your local library if you want to.
Yeah.
The Libby app, you guys. Try the Libby app.
Libby is great. I love it.
I love it so much.
Or Overdrive if you don't want to do Libby. Both are great. So, there are a lot of resources out there.
All right. So I think that wraps it up for us this week. Thank you for joining us, you guys. Next week, join us next week for our She-Ra discussion. This is a Netflix show that brings us all a lot of joy. And it is light, fluffy, and happy, and so freaking colorful.
And you're gonna cry a lot if you're me.
Oh yeah, we've been talking about She-Ra since it came out, and it'll be an interesting and fun conversation. So join us for that. In the meantime, stay safe, wear your masks when you're outside, and we'll see you next week. All right, see you. Bye guys.
Bye everyone.